Welcome to part 2 of Practical Phishing Assessments. If you have not seen the first video of this course, I encourage you to do so before continuing on to this video. I'll leave a link in the description. Creating an Amazon EC2 instance is super easy. All you need to do is create an Amazon Web Services account, come up here to the search bar and type EC2, click on the first selection, and it will take you to this main dashboard page. Now pay attention up here. You can select what region you would like your server to be in. For our purposes, it doesn't matter too much, but try to keep it consistent across everything in this course. It'll just make your life a little bit easier. So the first thing you're going to do to launch an instance is come down here to this tab and click Launch Instance. This is going to bring you to a page where you can basically pick which type of server you want to run. Again, it doesn't matter too much, but I'm going to configure this Ubuntu server 20.04 LTS. Again, this is a free tier eligible server, and GoFish works very nicely with Ubuntu. So I'm just going to make sure I'm on this one, click select. For our purposes, we don't need that much computing power, so we're just going to select this free tier T2 micro instance. Hit review and launch, and you'll see that will give you a little security warning saying that it's open to the world. Don't worry too much about that. We're going to configure security groups in the next video. So you can double check everything on here if you want to look at your storage details or really anything else. If you want to add some custom tags to help keep better track of this, you can do so. But we're just going to click launch, and you can actually see here it's going to ask you to choose a key pair. Now what a key pair is it allows you to use a certain key, which is almost like a password, to SSH into your server. So we're going to say create a new key pair, and we're going to name this phishing, and then we're going to download that key pair. You'll see that we save this phishing.pem file. Save that, and make sure you hold on to that and don't lose it. Next, we're going to launch the instance, and you'll see everything starts getting set up. And it says your instances are now launching. Click View Instances, and you'll see this is kind of your dashboard. You'll see the name of it, the ID. You'll see that it's running. So right now the instance state is still pending. So maybe in 30 seconds or so, yep, there it goes. It's now running. So we can connect to this, but before we want to do that, we're going to actually configure security groups. So we'll do that in the next video. The first thing we're going to want to do after creating our Amazon EC2 instance is we're going to want to come down here to security groups. Now what a security group will allow you to do is kind of regulate which ports are open and which ports are closed. And this is going to be useful because we don't want to allow every single port open, but we also want to allow certain traffic to get through to our web server. So like I said, you just come down here to security groups, and then you're going to click create new security group. Now you can name this whatever you want. I'm just going to name it phishing. Open ports for the description. And then down here in inbound rules, you can see this security group has no inbound rules. So we're going to want to add a couple custom ones. The first one we're going to add is just the SSH port. Now what this will allow us to do is just simply SSH into our server to get things configured. Add another rule. And the next one we're going to do, you're going to want to change this from TCP to UDP. And then you're going to want to change the port number to 53. And what this will do is allow DNS to work on our server. So we're just going to name this DNS. We're going to add another rule. Again, this one's going to be a custom TCP. It should autofill that for you. We're going to change this to 80 because that's the default HTTP port. So we're just going to name this HTTP. And since this is a web server, that's pretty essential. Next, we're going to add another TCP port, and this one is going to be 443. This will allow our server to send secure traffic, so this will be HTTPS. And finally, we're going to add one more TCP port, and this is going to be port 3333. Now, 3333 is not a standard port. This is actually the port that the GoFish admin panel is going to be running on. So if you don't set these, you could set everything up, and whenever you try to access your GoFish admin panel, it will just say connection timed out, and that's because this port has not been opened. So we're just going to name this Go Fish Admin. All right, and that looks good. So we can just click Create Security Group. All right, and then to assign this security group to our EC2 instance, we can come back to this Instances tab, go to Security Group, Security, change Security Groups, and then we're going to want to remove this, and then add the phishing one that we just made. Keep in mind this will be whatever you just named it. Click Save. Oh, click Add Security Group first, and then click Save. And then everything should work. So now you can see if you click on this and come down to Security, we are in our new security group, and you can see that we have inbound traffic to these 5 ports. Now that we have our Amazon EC2 instance set up and we have our security group set, there's 2 different ways we can access our web server. The first and most easy way is just to right click on your server and click Connect, and then click Connect down here, and Amazon will essentially open a terminal in your web browser. And this is a completely fine way of administrating your server. You can see that you can type commands in here and it responds just like a normal box would. Now my preferred way of doing this is just through the Linux terminal. If you're not using Linux, you can go ahead and set up Putty on Windows. It's super easy to SSH. So the first thing you're going to want to do is remember that key we downloaded earlier, the phishing.pem key. That's actually our key to connect to this Amazon EC2 instance. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to move that from our downloads to our SSH folder. Now that that's moved, we're going to want to change the permissions on that. And you don't have to worry too much about what's going on behind the scenes here, but essentially Linux wants to make sure that your keys are secure before using them. So we're going to want to change the permissions on that. And now we'll be able to use this key right here in the SSH folder to connect to this machine using this user. So we'll just run that. And you can see we're actually SSH'd into our server right now. I wanted to very quickly go over how to connect to your Amazon EC2 instance if you're using Windows. So the first thing you're going to have to do is download Putty, which you can find on greenn.org. Download the executable that is suitable for your system. Once you do that, you'll get 2 programs. You'll get Putty Configuration and Putty Keygen, otherwise known as PuttyGen. So the first thing you're going to want to do is find your SSH key that you downloaded when we created the EC2 instance. Mine's just in my downloads folder. You're going to want to open PuttyGen and make sure you have this RSA key checked, and then load in your key that you downloaded from AWS. Now initially this is going to be looking for a .ppk file. Just change this to all files. Click My Key, or whatever you called your key. It's going to be a .pem file. Open that. It will say it has been successfully imported. Click OK. Now you're going to want to save your private key. You can save it wherever you want and just name it whatever you want. I'll name it My Key. And you can see that now we have My Key and we have mykey.pem. Notice that this is a Putty private key file instead of a PEM file. This is what Putty will use to connect to our EC2 instance. So now you're going to open the actual Putty program. In this first tab under Session, put in, for the host name, put in your Amazon EC2 instance IP and make sure you're on port 22. And then you're going to want to come down here to SSH and then auth. And then in this field right here, click Browse. And then put in the key that you just created from the key that you downloaded from AWS. Click Open. And if you come back to Session and click Open, you're going to get a prompt telling you to log in. The username that we're going to use is just Ubuntu because that's the EC2 instance that we used. So once we use that, it's going to use our key file as a password, and we get access to our Amazon EC2 instance. Alright, I'm going to walk you through the very first part of setting up Mailgun for sending out our email. So essentially what Mailgun is going to do is it's going to allow us to actually send an email from whatever our domain is. So in our case, our domain that we purchased is phishinglnc.com. So what Mailgun is going to allow us to do is send out emails using GoPhish and give us the right SMTP settings to actually send out a email from, say John Smith at phishinglnc.com. So the first thing you're going to want to do is just come to mailgun.com. If you would like, you can kind of read through and see what Mailgun is actually used for. The first thing we're going to do is go ahead and click Get Started. And then it's going to ask you for all these different things from you. It's going to ask for your name, your company, your work email, all these different things. You don't actually have to add a payment info. You can go and add that later. The payment info won't actually be used unless you start using their premium services. So for now, you can just go through and fill these out. I'm going to pause it and fill these out. And then once we do that, I'm just going to click Create Account and then walk you through how to actually add your domain to Mailgun. Alright, so I have gone through and I've filled out those login details, and a few things to note. One, it says you need to input a work email. Generally, that means that you need something besides at gmail.com, at hotmail.com, whatever that may be. I went ahead and tried with a Gmail account just to see if it worked, and it seemed to work just fine. The next thing is regarding the payment details. You will be throttled, and you'll only be able to send to 5 users if you don't verify with a credit card. I don't think that should be too big of an issue, because whenever you input your credit card, it verifies you, but then it doesn't cost any money to send out emails. The next thing to note is that I'm not sure if this is specific to me, but when I input my two-factor code from my email, it asked me to add my cell phone number. So you probably won't be able to create multiple cell phone or multiple Mailgun accounts if you don't have access to multiple cell phone numbers. So just keep that in mind. With that being said, the next step you're going to need to do is right here, add and verify a domain. And I'm going to walk you through how to do that in the next video. Alright, so now I'm going to walk you through how to add your domain to Mailgun and how to verify yourself. So the first thing that you need to do once you've created your account is you're going to need to provide your credit card details so that Mailgun has a way to authenticate you. Now the reason you have to do this according to Mailgun is because if you don't add your credit card details, they have no way to verify you against a third party. So you can look through the Mailgun support, and whenever you go ahead and add your credit card, they'll tell you, hey, you're allowed 5,000 free emails, and then after that, we're going to start charging you. So for my purposes, I don't ever plan on sending out more than 5,000 emails a month, even for a massive phishing campaign. So that doesn't bother me, but if you're sending out more than 5,000, just be aware that you will start incurring charges. So to do that, all you need to do is come up here to this upgrade set button right here, and it will ask you for your credit card details. Go ahead and enter those, and then you'll be brought back to this dashboard. And once you do that, you can go ahead and add your domain. But keep in mind, you can't add a domain unless you enter your credit card. So I've already added my credit card. So I'm going to go down to this Domains tab and then click Add a New Domain. So for the domain I bought, it's phishinglnc.com. Go ahead and click Add Domain, obviously filling in the domain that you purchased. Alright, and the first thing we're going to need to do is add these text records and CNAME records. Now Mailgun says that it's recommended for you to add MX records. I've found that Mailgun's MX records don't ever actually verify, and I don't really need them, so I'm not going to add them in this. But if you are having issues or you want to read responses to emails that you've sent, say you send someone a phishing email and they respond to it, adding your Nginx record will allow you to receive that email. So just keep that in mind. So the first thing we're going to do is open up our DNS settings. If you've been following along, then you probably bought your domain using Amazon Route 53. If you use something such as GoDaddy or Namecheap, they have write-ups for how to edit your DNS records. But for me, it's just in Route 53. So I'm going to go ahead and create these records that Mailgun has generated for me. So the first one is a text record. Now, when I was going through the official Mailgun documentation, Mailgun recommends putting an @ in this first record name. I found that this doesn't work. So if you're using something such as GoDaddy, you might need to add this @. For me, I found that that makes it to where the DNS records don't actually get verified. So just keep that in mind, that if you don't put the @ and it doesn't get verified, try it again with the @. But for me on AWS, you don't seem to need it, even though it's recommended by Mailgun. So the first thing we're going to do is change this record type to text record. And then we're going to copy this value that Mailgun has generated for us into this value field. Make sure everything looks good and go ahead and click create record. The next one is this mail._domain key. This is a Dkim record. So all you're going to need to do is click create record again. Change this to a text record. And then you're going to want to copy this that Mailgun has generated for you. It will probably be different than mine, but one thing to keep in mind is make sure you don't accidentally copy this extra period right here. I've done that, but as you can see, Amazon, whenever you put in a value here, it actually adds that for you. So just keep that in mind. Again, you're going to change this to text record, and then you're going to paste in this big long string that Mailgun has generated for you. Once that's done, go ahead and click create record. And like I said before, these Nginx records you can add if you want. To do so, all you need to do is click create record, select Nginx, and then for the value, you type the priority 10 and then paste in this value. For me, I've noticed that Mailgun, it's kind of wishy-washy whether or not it actually verifies those, and since I don't need them, I'm just not going to add them, and you won't need them for this course. So the next one we're going to add is a CNAME record. So to do that, just go ahead and click create record, change the type to CNAME. The record name, whatever Mailgun has generated for you, typically it's email, but that might change depending on your region. And then again, for the value, it might change depending on where you are, but for me it's just mailgun.org. Go ahead and click create record. Now that all that's done, you're going to need to wait for your DNS records to propagate. Now this is where I've had the most issues with Mailgun and really any DNS verification system. Sometimes it takes 30 seconds for these to update, and sometimes it takes up to an hour. Mailgun down here says it takes 24 to 48 hours. I've never had it take that long, but if this isn't working for you, then it's very likely that it's just taking a while. If you want to check, you can go ahead and open up a terminal and type dig and then your domain name. And then say I want to check the text record, I can just go ahead and add the txt. And you can see that from my location, it has actually updated. You can go ahead and check other ones with CNAME or if you added the Nginx records. But if you'll notice, if you go and verify your settings, sometimes these don't actually update. So you can see this one has been verified, but this one has not. So again, from my location it has, but from wherever Mailgun is checking, it might not have propagated to that DNS server yet. So I would just give this anywhere between an hour to 2 hours. Again, Mailgun says it can take up to 2 days. I've never had it take that long, but just keep in mind that if you're having issues, then that could be the problem. I'll go ahead and pause the video, and once it has finished verifying, then I will be back to show you what the next step is. Alright, so for me it took about 30-45 minutes for Mailgun to actually recognize that I've updated the DNS records. Again, the super annoying thing about DNS is sometimes it takes 30 seconds, sometimes it takes, according to Mailgun, up to 2 days. So you just kind of have to be patient with it, and if you added all these and you have double checked that you have added them correctly, then it should just be you just need to wait, but again, it just depends on how long it takes Mailgun to update those. So as you can see, I have these as verified, and if I come over to this domains tab, you'll see I have a little green check here saying that the domain is verified and ready for use. So next up, I'm going to show you how to send a test email to make sure that you've set up everything correctly. So for that, it will be in the next video, and then I'll also show you how to set up the SMTP credentials. Alright, so now that our domain has been verified, you will have two options to creating your SMTP settings. If your domain has just been verified and you click the Verify Domain button down here where you're seeing all your DNS records, Mailgun will automatically send you to a page where it says, would you like to use an API key or SMTP credentials? Now if you click that SMTP credentials, it will list everything out for you, but since I backed out of that page, the credentials have already been made for me. So I'm going to show you how to get those SMTP credentials after you've initially created them. So the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure you have your domain as the one you purchased, and then you're going to come to this SMTP credentials tab, and you'll see that this postmaster@yourdomain.com has been created. To get the password for this, the only way you are able to get it is by resetting the password, which is kind of clunky, but it works. So go ahead and reset the password, and then you'll be able to copy it to your clipboard. Now this is GoFish. I haven't showed you how to set up GoFish yet, but in a later video you will see how to set this up. And all you're going to need to want to do is come over to the Sending Profiles tab, click New Profile, name it whatever you want. Since we're just going to be testing our Mailgun, I'll name it Testing. I'll go ahead and paste this password in. You can see it's the super long string that I copied from here. In the From tab, this is going to be who your email is coming from. So I'll just do hello at, and then phishing, or your domain. In my case, it's phishinglnc.com. For the host, you're going to want to do this value right here, smtp.mailgun.org. And then you're going to want to do a colon, and the port number is 587. Alright, and then for the username, you're going to want to do this postmaster@phishinglnc.com. And then we're going to go ahead and send a test email. So for me, I've already filled this out. So I'm going to just do a quick 10-minute mail. If you don't know what 10-minute mail is, it's a quick and easy way to get a disposable email. So I'll just copy this, paste it into the sending profile, and then click send. Alright, and it will say email sent. Now I've found that sometimes the test email takes a while, so I'll go ahead and pause the video, and when it pops into 10-minute mail, I will unpause it and walk you through the next steps. Alright, so as you can see, it took a couple minutes, but this email did show up. So you'll see that this is just a test email saying, hey, your GoFish instance is working. Again, I know I haven't shown you how to set up GoFish yet, but that will be later in the course. And now you know how to test your email once GoFish has been set up. Now in Mailgun, if you come over here to this Logs tab, you'll see that you can see the logs of when emails were sent. Now this is super useful for a phishing campaign because you will see, hey, my email has been accepted, and this means it's actually been sent. And then right here says it's been delivered. So if you start getting a bunch of undelivered messages, that might mean that your email is getting blocked or you're having some issues. But I found that Mailgun does a very good job at giving you a ton of information, and is actually much better than Amazon's simple email services. So it's like kind of a big win that people were having issues with SES, because now we found that using Mailgun gives you a lot more information for your phishing campaign. Now that we have SSH access into our Amazon EC2 instance, whether that's through the Linux command line, or you're using Windows and Putty, or you're simply connected through the web browser, we're going to want to install GoPhish. Now, to make sure everything runs smoothly, we're going to want to make sure that all the packages on our Ubuntu machine are up to date. So to do so, type sudo apt-get update to update the list of packages. And then to actually upgrade the programs, you're going to write sudo apt-get upgrade. Now keep in mind that this might take you a little bit longer depending on your internet connection. I've already done this, so it was super quick for me, but it might take you about 5 minutes to get all these installed. Next, we're going to want to install Golang. So to do so, type sudo apt-get install Golang. Again, this might take a second, but once it's done, you'll be returned a command prompt. Type ls, and you should see a Go folder here. Now all we're going to do is install GoPhish, which is super simple. Simply type go git and then the link to this GitHub page. You just copy it from here. Now that will take a second to get all the files, but essentially what it's doing is grabbing all these files up here and putting them onto our server. So once that's done, you're going to do a quick ls and go into the Go folder. From there, you're going to go to Source, GitHub, GoPhish, and then GoPhish one more time. And once you're in this folder and you do a quick ls, you'll see this gofish.go file. Now we're actually going to build this program using Go. So to do so, just type go space build. Now again, this will take a minute, but essentially what this is doing is it's building the actual GoPhish program using Golang. When it's done, you'll get your command prompt returned to you. You can type ls, and you can see that this gofish.go has made this GoPhish file. So before we run this GoPhish file, we're going to need to edit this config.json file. You can open this up in Nano or Vim. And you're going to want to change this third line right here where it says listen_URL. What this is essentially saying is that we can only connect to this GoPhish admin panel from our current server. Now obviously we don't have a GUI on this, and we're going to want to access this via a web browser. So we're going to open this up to any IP. So to do so, just change this from 127.0.0.1 to 0.0.0.0. Now keep in mind that this is going to be running on port 3333. That will be helpful in the future. So make sure you save and quit this. And then from there we can type sudo./gofish to actually start our GoPhish server. So to connect to it, we're going to want to keep this in mind. This username is admin, and then it generates a random password for us. So to connect to this, we're going to want to come down to our Amazon EC2 dashboard, copy our public IP address, open up a new tab, and you're going to want to paste that in, and make sure you type HTTPS in front of this, ://. And then at the end of this, you're going to want to designate that we're running this on port 3333. And it's going to warn you about a potential security risk. This is just because we're connecting over HTTPS, and this is using a self-signed certificate. Go ahead and click accept and continue. And that's going to ask us to sign in. So we know that the username is admin, and then your password will be randomly generated over here. So go ahead and copy that and paste. And then it's going to ask you to reset a stronger password. So you can just grab one from your password manager, generate a random one, and save that. Oh, let me generate a new password, click Save Password, and that's it for installing GoFish. Now we'll have access to all of our campaigns, email templates, all those fun stuff. So next up, we're going to be installing Evil Nginx, and with that, we'll actually be able to create our landing page. Alright, now that we've set up GoFish, we have the easy part. Now the easy part is setting up Evil Nginx 2. So what you're going to want to do is come to this Evil Nginx 2 GitHub page and scroll down to the installation. Now we've already installed Go, so we don't need to do that. So all you're going to need to do to install this is just copy this and paste it into here. And this is going to install git and make. This is going to clone the actual Evil Nginx 2 repository. This is going to move us into it, and then this is actually going to execute the make command and actually build all the files that we need. So now that we're in the Evil Nginx 2 and everything is done being created, you can do a quick ls to make sure all the files are here. And to run it, you're just going to copy this command and paste. And you'll see that Evil Nginx 2 is up and running. You'll probably get this fail to start name server on port 53 error. Don't worry too much about that. And as you can see, we have all these fishlets. Now what a fishlet is essentially what the victim is going to see. So if you want to send your phishing campaign with a Reddit login or a Facebook login, then you could do so. This tutorial will just simply be for Outlook, but if you wanted to do Office 365 or GitHub, those would also work. Alright, so now we've gotten to the interesting portion of the course where we're actually going to be finishing setting up Evil Nginx. We're going to be editing some DNS records here in Route 53, and I'm actually going to show you what our fish is going to look like from our victim's point of view. So the first thing you're going to want to do is set up Evil Nginx and tell it what your domain is. So to do so, just type config, domain, and then whatever your domain is that you bought for your phishing campaign. So in our case, it's phishinglnc.com. You're going to want to tell it what IP address it's running on. So to do that, type config IP, and then just copy your public IPv4 address from your Amazon EC2 instance and paste that in. Now we want to come over to Route 53. To get there, you can just type Route 53 in the search bar. And you're going to want to create a few DNS records to make it a little more sneaky when someone actually clicks on our fish. Instead of just going to phishinglnc.com, we want them to go to something along the lines of www.microsoft.phishing.lnc.com. Obviously, we can make whatever we want right here, but your average user doesn't know too much about that. They'll just see microsoft.com or login.microsoft.com, and they'll think they're actually on a Microsoft login page. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to create a DNS record. This should be the same no matter what provider you're using. It will look a little bit different, but the general information is the same. So the record name, I'll just walk you through creating microsoft.phishinginc.com. Create Microsoft, again, .phishinginc.com. Now be careful not to put an extra period here because there's already one at the very beginning of phishinginc.com. You're going to want to create an A record, and then you're going to want to paste in the value of your EC2 server right here. Now these can take up to 24 hours to propagate. In my experience, it doesn't take longer than usually about 30 seconds, but if this isn't working for you, just know that sometimes it takes some time. Depending on where you are and how close you are to your closest DNS server, it can take some time. So go ahead and pause the screen right now and enter the rest of these DNS records. Again, I entered them yesterday to make sure that everything was up and working and everything has had time to propagate. Once you have all these set up, you're going to want to finish configuring Evil Nginx. To do so, we're going to be using Office 365 as our fishlet, as you can see right here. You can use any of these other ones, but keep in mind that if you use a different one, your DNS records are going to be a little bit different. So to configure our fishlet, we're going to type fishlets host name, and then whatever fishlet you're using. So we're using Office 365. And then we're just going to use Microsoft.fishinglnc.com. And again, we set that DNS record over here. Now we need to enable this fishlet. So to do so, all you have to do is type fishlets enable O365. And if everything is set up with your DNS records correctly, you'll see this message saying successfully got an SSL certificate. What that means is there won't be any weird errors saying that our certificates are self-signed or there's an insecure connection. Now, if you're using a different type of fishlet, say GitHub or ProtonMail, and you want to know what DNS records to put over here, you're going to get an error, and it's going to say, we couldn't find the SSL certificate for, and then it will list a bunch of different domains. All you need to do is add those domains and replace these. Again, that's only if you're using a different fishlet. So next we need to create our lure. So to do that, you just type lures, create, and then Office 365. And you'll see it will say create a lure with ID 0. Next, you're going to want to get the actual URL for our fish. To do that, just type lures, get-URL, and then the ID that was just created here. In our case, that's 0. Now this is actually our phishing link that we will be sending in our email. I'm going to open up an incognito tab, actually paste that in, and you can see we're starting to get some information over here. So just to make sure that this works, we're going to want to actually authenticate to Microsoft. And you'll see that this login.microsoft.phishinginc.com is not actually a Microsoft login page, but Evil Nginx, as soon as we connect, is running out to Microsoft and saying, hey, I need to connect. Microsoft is saying okay, and is sending that page to us, and then Evil Nginx is sending that page to the victim. So we're going to try to authenticate. Click next. We'll enter our password. Paste that in. Now you'll notice that's going to ask us for our two-factor authentication code. So I have that set up on my iPhone. 041791. Click verify. And you'll see over here that we're actually capturing credentials. Now it doesn't matter what you click here. You'll see that we've actually authenticated to this user. And over here, you can see that we actually captured our credentials. So if you type sessions, you'll see that we have a session with Obi-Wan.Kenobi. We have his password and we have his token. So if you type sessions and then the number corresponding to the session you want to look at, you can see, if you spell it right, sessions 4, you can see we get a whole bunch more info. We get the full username, full password, and a session cookie. Now, the session cookie is actually what allows us to authenticate without having to put in a credentials or even a two-factor code. So if I close this and I create a new tab and I go to Microsoft, login.microsoft.com, and I delete all the cookies I have set right now, and I take this cookie, copy the value, delete all these cookies, import a cookie. Now this is JSON format, so we just paste it in here and click import, and then you'll see it sets some authentication cookies. We'll go over here and refresh, and just like that, we've bypassed two-factor authentication. And in case that doesn't work, or we want to try this password on other services, we have the username and the password that they've used. So with that, that's what our fish is going to look like when the user clicks on it. Now all we have to do is configure GoFish to actually send out this phishing campaign.